What's going on, guys? It's Fight Season MMA, and today I want to talk about why Belal Muhammad, the welterweight champion, is going to absolutely destroy Shavkat Rakhmonov when they fought. Originally, I was on the boat that Shavkat was going to go in there and give Belal a whole different bunch of types of issues in there. But after watching this fight with Ian Gary, UFC 310 co-main event, Shavkat Rakhmonov looked really different than we normally used to see him, and I think that Shavkat is going to get absolutely exposed by Belal Muhammad if he fights any way of what we know him to fight in that fight, and even some of his other fights. I think Shavkat is going to get broken by Belal, and Belal is going to go in there and absolutely dominate him over the course of 5 rounds. But before we jump into the video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. That is the best way to help the channel grow. And while you're down there, please turn on the post notifications. But without further ado, let's jump into the video talking about why Belal Muhammad is going to go out there and absolutely dismantle and destroy Shavkat Rakhmonov in their welterweight title bout. So, Belal Muhammad versus Shavkat Rakhmonov is officially going to be the next fight for the UFC welterweight title. At UFC 310, there was a #1 contenders match after Belal Muhammad pulled out with his fight with Shavkat with a bone infection in his toe. So, Shavkat ended up staying on the card, fighting Ian Machado Gary, 18-0 Shavkat versus 15-0 Ian Gary. And ultimately, Shavkat kept his perfect record, moving up to 19-0 with 18 finishes, getting the decision win over Ian Gary. What's crazy about this fight, though, is Ian Gary might have lost, but he came out after the fight and he says he doesn't feel like he lost, and I 100% agree with him. I believe that Ian Gary's stock from this Shavkat Rakhmonov fight went up more, and Shavkat's stock went down from this fight. This was a very disappointing performance for Shavkat Rakhmonov to not go in there and live up to the hype. We know 18 finishes. He can't finish everyone, but Ian Gary isn't the most dynamic grappler on the ground, and Shavkat wasn't able to take him down. So I see that aspect, and I really looked at that was kind of a hole in Shavkat's game. It also was a very boring fight compared to what we were used to. Shavkat usually pushes the pace, usually sitting in there striking with everyone, but really in this one, he was just kind of going for the clinch, kind of rolling up against the octagon, trying to get that takedown whenever he needed to, and wasn't going for specific things that would ultimately lead him into different finishing positions. Now, I don't know if it was because he was worried about Ian Gary and some other things, or some, him possibly losing position and whatnot, or if there was something else major. Now, I know Shavkat Rakhmonov head into this fight with reportedly a torn MCL. Now, obviously, if that is the case, that is a massive injury, and I have no idea why Shavkat actually stayed in that fight. It would have made a whole lot more sense that once Belal Muhammad pulled out, that Shavkat would pull out as well to preserve his title shot. But in reality, Shavkat ended up fighting Gary, and maybe he just wasn't as comfortable with his movement and ultimately didn't want to go in there and rush with Gary. But the biggest thing that I saw was Shavkat Rakhmonov's defense with Ian Gary on his back, and that was absolutely crazy to see in that final round. Ian Gary got on the ground, ended up getting the body triangle, and ultimately threatened with a rear naked choke for a couple minutes on the ground. And that was something that we saw Shavkat first off inside the UFC panic. He looked incredibly distressed on the ground, as anyone should be, but genuinely, we have never seen Shavkat that close to being finished inside the UFC, and he fought Jeff Neal getting absolutely battered there, but this was easily the closest we have ever seen a Shavkat getting finished, and it was a rear naked choke submission by Ian Machado Gary, who isn't like the most technical submission artist inside the organization. But this showed me, now going to this Belal Muhammad fight, it showed me a lot of how Shavkat is really going to get exposed by Belal. First off, the pressure that Belal puts on you is going to overwhelm Shavkat. There's not really any fighter inside the UFC who can deal with Belal Muhammad's pressure. I've kind of just, given into it at this point that Belal's pressure is one of the toughest things to really overcome. I look at this Leon Edwards fight, and Belal was so smart because he understood that Leon Edwards is such an incomplete fighter when you take off some little aspect of his game, that namely being his kicks. When he did that, ultimately Leon turned incredibly one-dimensional. Obviously, he still had a good jiu-jitsu game, which he showed in that 3rd round, and he ultimately got the 5th round down to the ground, splitting Belal open, but it wasn't anything insane. It was just Belal going in there and absolutely ragdolling Leon Edwards all around the octagon, and that's how Belal likes to do it. I see that same thing happening with Shavkat. I know Shavkat's probably going to be a little heavier, a little thicker than Leon is, but Belal, I think, is just going to put the pressure on him. He's going to really go in there and threaten Shavkat, and Shavkat's not this incredible, striker who kind of does these things and whatnot. I don't think that the biggest thing that Shavkat's going to have to worry about from Belal is that takedown threat, and I don't know if he's going to really be able to stop it. I see Ian Gary get Shavkat to the ground that easily and keep him down for that length of time, and I 100% see Belal Muhammad doing the exact same thing. I think Belal would ride out a decision victory over Shavkat. I think that pressure is going to be too much. I think the biggest difference between Belal going up against Shavkat and Leon Edwards is Leon Edwards is kind of a gun-shy fighter. And when I say that is he has trouble pulling the trigger with some of his very lethal kicks to go for the finish. And the only thing we did see is once Leon Edwards said he threw caution to the wind and landed that elbow on Belal Muhammad in that 5th round, it showed that Leon was starting to turn the fight, but it just was too late, and Leon Edwards wasn't able to do that. Now, Shavkat Rakhmonov will pull the trigger pretty quickly, and he will do everything in his power to try to get Belal Muhammad outside the octagon as fast as possible. Shavkat does not want to stay more than he's welcome, and genuinely, he just wants to go and get that belt and go back on his day. And I do think that that is a very possible solution or situation to happen in this case. But Belal Muhammad, as we all know, is very resilient. He's a very good fighter. He comes through adversity pretty well, and I think that his grappling is going to be too suffocating for Shavkat Rakhmonov to really go in there and deal. I look at this Ian Gary fight, and I even look at the Jeff Neal fight and the Stephen Wonderboy Thompson fight, and I see Shavkat fighting different in those fights. He's had flaws in each one of them. Jeff Neal performance was amazing. Don't get me wrong. That bulldog choke at the end of the 3rd round with a minute left to keep his streak alive was great, but Shavkat was getting pieced up hard in that fight by Jeff Neal, and Jeff Neal isn't like this incredible, unbeatable boxer inside the UFC. Fast forward to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Shavkat had to wrestle that entire fight, and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, not one of the greatest grappling defenders inside the organization, was able to keep Shavkat off his neck for the entire 1st round and 2nd round, mostly until he got finished with like 5 or 10 seconds left. And this fight, Ian Gary was able to defend the takedowns of Shavkat Rakhmonov to ultimately prolong the fight. I see Belal Muhammad going in there, doing what he normally does, and ultimately getting this win in pretty, easy fashion. I really don't think there's anyone in the organization who's going to be able to defeat Belal Muhammad anytime soon. I think he's just that good of a fighter, and I think that he's going to go out there and genuinely go and show Shavkat Rakhmonov that there is levels to this game. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say it's going to be a finish or a submission or anything like that, but I do think it's going to be a very good and dominant fight. It might be close on the scorecards, kind of like that Leon Edwards fight was, 48-47, but we all know who won out of Leon and Belal pretty handily. And I could 100% see the same thing happening with Shavkat Rakhmonov and Belal Muhammad coming up in their next title bout. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Fight Season MMA, and please, please, please tell me what you think about Belal Muhammad versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. I am so interested to see these two individuals go at it with one another and truly show who is going to be the best fighter out of the two in the welterweight division. I think that there's been a lot of hype surrounding Shavkat for a very long time because of that finishing streak. But as I saw today on Michael Bisping's podcast, they were talking about how, when you get finishes and when you get wins, it kind of negates all the issues that have been going on. And as an opponent, I think Belal Muhammad is going to do some tape study. He's going to understand that Shavkat isn't unbreakable. And I think in that Ian Gary fight, we really saw that he was not unbreakable. And I think Belal's veteran experience and great grappling ability and pressure is going to go in there and ultimately beat Shavkat to allow Belal to get his first ever UFC title defense. I think it's going to be a very interesting fight. I think it's going to be a very good fight between these two, but I do see Belal Muhammad going in there and wrestling himself to a decision win. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Fight Season MMA. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you guys enjoy the UFC content. And while you're down there, please turn on the post notifications just so you guys are always notified about UFC content releasing every single day. But without further ado, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you guys very soon with more UFC content and news.